She may be one of the most influential political figures of the 20th century, but did Baroness Thatcher influence Asia? And holding firm, port workers in Hong Kong entered their 13th day of strike over wages. Hello and welcome to Asia Business Report. I'm SHARANJIT LEYL in Singapore. Now, as you've been hearing on the channel, former British Prime Minister Baroness Margaret Thatcher has died following a stroke at the age of 87. She was one of the most influential political figures of the 20th century. On the economic front, one of her biggest initiatives was to repair Britain's finances by reducing the role of the state and boosting the free market. And those policies had an impact not just in the UK, but also here in Asia. Well, earlier I spoke with Sanjeev Sanyal, who's a global strategist with Deutsche Bank, but he's also an author of several books about India. And I started by asking him how much of an influence Baroness Thatcher had in India.
She had a huge influence on my generation of Indians who grew up in the 1980s in a socialist India, which was clearly failing. And you, of course, had all the socialist countries around us also failing at that time. So she had a huge influence on the way we thought about how a new economy, a new India could be built. And of course, it all culminated in 1991, where the Indian economy essentially collapsed, and finally we were forced to begin liberalizing our economy.
And so were Indian leaders at that time quite actively looking at what Britain had done the previous decade to try to revamp their economy?
Indian leaders were not, but my generation, who was growing up at that time, were hugely influenced by Baroness Thatcher because we could clearly see how things were failing. Remember, I personally grew up in Calcutta, which was a major industrial center in the 1970s and 80s, but it was brought to a grinding halt by industrial action. Trade unions going on strike virtually on a daily basis, and as a result, Calcutta as an industrial center has never really recovered. So if you want to see what Britain would have looked like if you didn't have Margaret Thatcher, just visit Calcutta.
Now, how much do you think the free market policies that she instated in Britain, how much do you see that now in Asia today?
Well, certainly, as I said, the free markets were a very important legacy she has left ideologically, which has influenced much of the world, including Asian economies. India, for example, began doing its reforms in the 1990s. It's still unfinished business, but clearly, as my generation begins to make its way up the policy framework, you will see the influence of that even in India, even more strongly over time.
Sanjeev Sanyal there from Deutsche Bank. To Hong Kong now, where the strike at the world's third largest container port is entering its 13th day. Hundreds of dock workers and crane operators are asking for close to a 20% wage increase to keep up with inflation. Port operator Hong Kong International Terminals says the strike is costing the company more than $500,000 a day. The BBC's Jennifer Pack has more.
The Kuaiting port is the main hub for China. Cheap goods from the Chinese industrial heartland passes through this terminal to the rest of the world. The strike is slowing work at the port. Already there are reports that some ships have waited up to 60 hours to unload their cargo.
So we have to find alternate arrangements. This is money additional money that currently we are absorbing. We're hoping a quick solution can be found that puts us back to status quo.
The workers say they won't give in. They have been camping outside of the terminal next to a busy road for almost 2 weeks. These workers have helped drive Asia's economic boom, handling goods from across the world, but they are struggling. Hong Kong is one of the most expensive places to live anywhere in the world. If they factor in inflation, the workers say they earn less money today than they made a decade ago.
When I first started this job, my wife and I wanted to have children, but with my current wages, I cannot afford to save. Now, I can't even think about having kids.
The port operator, backed by billionaire Li Ka-shing, says they do not directly employ the workers and have refused to negotiate. So for now, it's a standoff. But if this dispute drags on, costs of goods will go up, and consumers around the world will have to pay more. Jennifer Pak, BBC News, Hong Kong.
In other business news now making headlines, North Korean workers did not show up for work at a jointly run factory complex with South Korea on Tuesday. The move comes a day after Pyongyang suspended operations at the Kaesong Industrial Zone. Kaesong was established almost a decade ago and had been a symbol of cooperation between the two Koreas. North Korea earlier announced it was withdrawing all its workers from the site and suspending operations there. The move follows weeks of warlike rhetoric from Pyongyang after it was sanctioned by the UN for carrying out its third nuclear test in February. Now, the Asian Development Bank has just released its growth outlook for the region. Its findings show that developing Asia is bouncing back from the slowdown of the previous year. It also found that robust domestic demand and greater reliance within regional trade will spur growth from just over 6% last year to more than 6.5% in 2013. And for more news and analysis from around the region, make sure you log on to the BBC's website and click on the Asia Business Index. Now, later today, the competition for the top job at the World Trade Organization is set to become more intense. The bottom 4 candidates of the 9 running will be asked to withdraw their applications. Over in Jakarta, Karishma Vaswani sat down with candidate Mari Pangestu, Indonesia's Culture and Tourism Minister, and started by asking her why the WTO is still an important institution.
I think the easiest way is to imagine if you didn't have the WTO, then we can have disputes, we can have trade wars that would be very rampant protectionism, and there would be no judge as to who's right or wrong, and you would end up with a lot of impediments in trade. So the WTO is key in ensuring that trade can continue to flow in a predictable, certain, rules-based and fair way.
The trade talks have been stalled for more than a decade. What's your solution to revive it? Nobody's been able to do it in the last decade.
Well, we should not give up. We should not do nothing. It's better still to do something. And the something is already being accepted by members, that we are going to try now a step-by-step process. If we can't complete the whole single undertaking, as they call it, the whole package of the round in one go, we'll do it step by step.
Why do you think it's important for Indonesia to put forward a candidate for the World Trade Organization?
Indonesia is an emerging economy, and for the last 5-10 years, we have increasingly played a role, an active role, in various global fora, including in G20. So this is part of how Indonesia perceives that it can contribute to global governance and representation from emerging economies.
Surely there's some irony in the fact that the World Trade Organization is the forum where countries like the US bring complaints about Indonesia, about being too protectionist, to this forum, and Indonesia is hoping to run it.
There's no inconsistency. That's why you need the WTO, because the WTO is an organization where there are rules, rules to do trade and a framework. And if you violate the rules or if you're doing something inconsistent, then countries can take you for consultation, first of all, and then for dispute. We have also brought US to dispute on the issue of clove cigarettes, for instance. And then it's resolved through a process which is fair. And if you are seen to be inconsistent, then you do have to change your policy.
You're one of the 3 female candidates for this position, and if you're elected, you'll be the first woman to run the WTO. Do you think it matters being a woman for this job?
I'd like to think that it's not a woman-man thing, but you want to be able to pick the most capable person to be able to run this organization under very challenging times. And if you can find a capable woman, that's all the better, because I believe diversity in any organization makes the organization more effective.
Mari Pangestu there speaking to Karishma Vaswani. Let's take a look at the markets now, because obviously they're doing fairly well here in Asia, with the exception of Korea's Kospi. Of course, the Nikkei continuing to leap past those 5-year highs. That's where it closed on Monday, continuing to extend on those gains. That's following those very aggressive stimulus measures put in place by the central bank just last week. But we're also seeing Australia continuing to do pretty well. It's actually rallying today. Essentially, a lot of the financial stocks doing well there, and the miners as well. We saw metals prices rising overnight, and as well slightly better earnings from a lot of the big resource companies, the likes of Alcoa, the aluminium maker, for instance, in the US, reporting results that beat expectations. And that's it for this edition of Asia Business Report. Thanks for watching.